Hello goat lovers, Crystal here with Blue Cactus Dairy Goats, and today we are going to make a Colby cheese. So stick around, we'll show you how it's done.
Hello goat lovers, this is Crystal with Blue Cactus Dairy Goats. What started with 4 chickens and 2 goats quickly grew into a lifestyle. So we moved, got more land, and of course, more goats. Follow our adventures as we grow our herd, our food, and our family.
So for the Colby and all the hard cheeses I've been making, I use a 3-gallon batch. It works out a lot better as far as the aging process if you don't use a smaller batch. And as well, it will keep the heat in the pan because it does have to sit for periods of time. The heat stays that you need it to be for quite a bit longer than if it was a smaller amount of milk. We're going to start with our milk and pour it into the pan. For starters, once you have your raw goat's milk, and we do use the raw, you are going to just get this pan up very slowly to 87 degrees, making sure you continually stir it so it's not scalding on the bottom. So it's not something you want to walk away from. So I'm going to get going on that, and we'll see you back when it's 87 degrees. Alright, I got my milk up to 87 degrees. What I do as well, if you turn it off right around 85 degrees, the residual heat from the pan is going to get it up to that 87. If you go, it quickly happens once it starts getting up in temperature. So if you go over, just add a little more cool milk until it gets back down to the 87. And at this point, I am going to add a ½ teaspoon of calcium chloride. And we're going to get that stirred in. So you just sprinkle it over the top. All you need is a ½ teaspoon. And I'm going to stir it in with my ladle. Up and down motions. And when you're stirring your milk, once you start adding the things, you want to avoid breaking the surface of the milk to pull in any bacteria down into the milk that could spoil your cheese and be all for naught. So just go around, up and down. Okay. So that's stirred in. Now, if you want to color your cheese, a lot of Colbys, Colbys are typically, you'll see them white and orange and it's mixed in, but if you want a colored cheese, no, it doesn't naturally come yellow or orange, use an annatto cheese coloring. It's annatto, so it's a natural coloring. So I have 1/8 cup of boiling water here, and I'm going to use a few drops of this annatto. And it stains. So I'm going to actually put that on a paper towel here. So this is the annatto and water. The last time I used this, the recipe called for literally 2 drops. So that's what I did, and it didn't color my cheese at all. You couldn't see it at all. So I'm adding a little more this time. And I'm just going to pour it over the ladle and stir it in just like I did before. Alright, so we'll just stir that in. You see already it will get darker once the whey is released, when we add the rennet and the whey begins to release, because in theory the annatto does not stay in the whey and it will stay in the curd, which will then make it darker. Then you see it now. Oops. Alright. So the next ingredient we're going to need is mesophilic culture. So it calls for, and I am also going off a 2-gallon batch recipe, so I'm just tweaking it a little for my 3-gallon batch, but it calls for half a pack, which is a 1/8 of a teaspoon. These packets is an 1/8 of a teaspoon. So I'm going to eyeball it. I know I need half the pack and then 1/4 of that, so I'm going to pinch it off. That's what I'm going to put in there. Okay, so it's just a white powder. I'm just going to sprinkle it right on top, again pinching off what I don't want to use. So it is a powder. So what I'm going to do, hold on, I didn't get the rest in the bottom. I'm going to allow that 5 minutes so that that powder doesn't cake when we mix it in. We want to make sure that that powder rehydrates with the milk in it. So I got my timer set for 5 minutes, and at this point, because I'm not messing with the milk or doing anything, I'm going to keep my lid on it. We want it to stay at that 87 degrees as long as possible, which again, another reason, you know, to do the larger batches, not only is it so time consuming, you want more milk than just a tiny little pound, but it helps keep the heat a lot better. So again, we're wanting this to stay at the 87 degrees. So after 5 minutes, I'll be back and we'll stir that mesophilic culture into the milk. It's been the 5 minutes, so now I'm going to stir in the mesophilic culture, up and down motions, trying not to break the surface. So, up and down. Get it mixed in really well. Again, it's a powder on top. Even though it's rehydrated, you want to make sure you get it in throughout the milk. Okay. So I'm going to leave the spoon here like this to stop the motion of the milk. And so we got the mesophilic culture stirred in really well throughout all the milk. And this is a point where we're going to let it rest. We want the culture to do its job. So we're going to come back here in 1 hour. So I'm going to set my timer. See you guys back here then. It's been 1 hour. So the milk has been resting for that hour. Now it's time to add the rennet. I use microbial rennet. And we are going to use, for the 3-gallon batch, I actually have an 1/8 cup of water as well. Good clean distilled water. And I'm going to use a 1/2 teaspoon of rennet. I'm just going to mix that in with the water. And now we will pour it in. Okay, so I'm going to pour the water rennet mixture over the slotted spoon, as to not have it directly in one spot. It mixes in better. And then we're just going to, without breaking the surface, gently mix in that rennet. You don't want to stir it too long, but you also want to make sure it's in, the rennet is throughout. All right. Hold the spoon to stop it. Let's see, it's already doing its work. Okay. Alright, so we're just going to lid it. I again, to keep the heat in as long as possible. Now this has to sit, and it's at 87 degrees. I checked it, so it's keeping its heat really well because it's a lot more milk than just a gallon. It'll keep that heat. But another 45 minutes this has to sit so that it will coagulate, and then we're going to come back and cut the curds in 45 minutes. So we'll see you then. It has been the 45 minutes that we needed to wait for the curds to form or the milk to coagulate. So what we're going to do is check the curds, and as long as there's a clean break and your knife or spatula or whatever comes out clean, we're good to go. And then we're going to start cutting these curds into 1/2 inch cubes. Alright, so what we're looking for again is a clean break. Oh yeah, those feel good. See that? And you pull it out, nothing but whey. So those curds are set. If they're not, just give them another 10 minutes and check again. So, I'm going to very carefully, all the way to the bottom, try to get them as even as possible, 1/2 inch curds, 1/2 inch cuts. And then we're going to go this way. So now at this point, this is kind of the harder part. It's hard enough with the curds moving around in the pan and whatnot to get them, you know, all kind of a 1/4 inch. But now we have curds from here to here that need cut this way. You know, horizontally, supposedly in a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch as well. So what I'm going to do is take this slotted spoon and carefully, as best I can, go through like this and try to cut those curds, you know, throughout. Again, best I can. It never works perfect, but I don't have the special tool that, you know, goes in there and cuts them all really well. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do, and hope this works. Alright, so you just got to dive in there, back and forth. Try to get the top layer first. Now go deeper. It will not ruin your cheese per se if they're not all a 1/4 inch perfectly, but you know, ideally they are, because then they release the whey about the same time. But again, it's hard to do this with a slotted spoon. And almost a foot of curd. So okay. So at this point, See the larger curds, which obviously I know there's going to be larger curds in here, but we're going to let it rest. Whoops. Okay, so I'm going to let this rest for 5-10 minutes just so some more of the whey can come out of the curds, because once you cut them it'll release more, and then we'll be back and I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit very slowly, and we're going to start stirring these curds and cutting the larger ones down to size. Alright, so I'm back from the curds resting for their 10 minutes. And I'm going to give them a quick stir because they will stick together. So I'm just going to loosen them up very carefully. Make sure you get all the way to the bottom. Want them to be very gentle. Okay. At this point, we are going to slowly, very slowly, get the temperature up to 102 degrees. I'm going to turn it on extremely low, like low, 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 almost off. Okay, and again, 102 degrees is what we're going to get this this up to. And while that happens, I'm just going to continue to stir the curds very gently. But as I'm stirring them and the larger curds come up, I'm going to cut them so into smaller pieces. All right. So as you see, like that large boy, just going to cut it. Keep bringing them up. And when, you know, we got the heat on, so you want to make sure you're always bringing it up from the top because it'll cook the bottom curds there, which you don't want them to cook too quickly because it will harden them, harden the outside, and then the whey won't be able to release. So, I am just going to continue to do this for the next 15 to 30 minutes. And then after we get to 102 degrees, another 15 or 30 minutes. It just depends on the curds. So I will be back here, guys, and show you what the curd is supposed to look like. We want it to be firm to the touch, without a lot of, you know, we don't want a lot of excess liquid in the curd when we break it open. So I'll be busy doing this, and we'll be back to show you the final curd. So at this point I have been stirring these curds for a good 35 minutes. Again, you want it very, very, very slowly to get to that temperature, so 102 degrees. You can go ahead and feel free to shut it off 2 degrees in advance. But this is at 102 degrees. And you see these curds much smaller, and they stick together very easily, so you just slowly keep stirring them. I did turn the heat off, and I am going to continue to stir them until all of the curds are to the texture that I'm looking for. So I'll show you guys. So we're going to be stirring them for until the curds are good, but 15 to 30 more minutes is what we're aiming for. And just to show you, here's one of the larger curds. I want to show you guys. You can feel it. It's squishy. And if you open it, if you guys see the liquid, that's not what we're looking for. We want that curd to cook. Not cook, I'm sorry. We want that curd to be of the texture of, let's find one. This one, let's see. So none of them are quite ready. Yeah, this one's pretty good. So it's springy, but when you open it, if you guys see, I hope you guys can see that, it's not real liquidy. Cool? So, I'm going to continue to just slowly stir these curds. And if you stop stirring them, they stick really easy. So just make sure you're stirring them, and we're going to keep it at the 102. Check your temperature every once in a while, because if that temp goes down, you're going to bring it back up. So I'll see you guys back here in 30 for the next step. I have my curds to the consistency I want to see them, where they're firm to the touch, but you know, not rubbery or anything, and they also aren't squishy. So at this point, I'm going to let them settle down to the bottom, because we have to drain the whey off right to the top of the curds. So again, just going to let them settle here, and we'll be back. So I drained the whey off right to the top of the curds, and now I'm going to put cool water over them, and I'm going to begin to stir them. So while we're getting cool water in here, we're just going to stir it. We're looking to get it to 85 degrees, which is pretty much the pan is full with the cold water from the faucet. So at this point, it's 85 degrees. The liquid in here in the curds is 85 degrees. So we're going to let the curds settle again, because we have to re-drain them, and we're going to put very, very cold water, which I just have a large bowl of ice, and then I fill it with water and leave it sit for a while until it's mainly melted. But I'll just take the ice cubes out. But we're going to pour that in afterwards to get it down to 70-75 degrees. I've drained the whey off again, just to the level of the curds, right above the curds. So now I'm going to add my cool water. I did take out the ice cubes because I don't want that. But we're going to get it down to 70-75 degrees. So I found about that amount. We'll get it down to that temp. I'm just going to stir it here and check it real quick. Perfect. 72. So now, at this point, I'm going to stir these until they firm up even more for a good 15 to 20 minutes, and that's what I will be doing. After these firm up, they're going to get quite a bit firmer. They're not going to be just a little bit resistant to touch. They will be pretty firm. So we are just at this point rinsing the curds. So that's what I will be doing for the next 15 to 20 minutes. These curds are at a very firm texture that I want them to be at. So come and take a look. So this is just kind of like a rinsing, if you will. They all look good. They're firmed up. See them? So now we drain them. Alright, so I got my cheesecloth. I'm going to dip it in this water whey, because it will help the cheese not stick to it when we're pressing it in the press. So I got that. Just put it in here for now so it doesn't get dirty. So at this point, we're just going to let these suckers drain for 15 minutes, get a lot of the excess water whey off of them, and then we're going to put it in the press. So, meet you back in 15 minutes. this is the point where you're like, whoo, we're finally going to put it in the press. It's definitely a long process. So I got my cheesecloth all lined out that was dipped in the whey. And here's some of these curds are sticking. I'm just going to separate them a little bit. And I'm going to start putting them in the cheese press. You guys see that color? You might not be able to tell so much, but that's white, and that's, you know, if you use the dye for it. So I'm just going to separate them up as I put them in here. Look at these curds. Lovely. As I put them in, I kind of press them down. There we go. Alright, so at this point I'm finding a long corner to put over the top and press down on it. Put in my cheese press. So for the first press, we want 15 minutes at 10 pounds. I'm going to just tuck these in here. How do you know it's 10 pounds, you say? I don't. I go with the feel. This particular press, which I actually love, it's the first thing I started with, I just kind of gauge it. A 10-pound press is not going to be really heavy. You're literally like right there. I just felt a little bit of give. So I'm going to leave it right there. And we're going to do that for 15 minutes. And then we're going to come back, flip it, and we're going to do it for another 30 minutes at 20 pounds. So with this particular press, like I was saying, it's a cheese press and it is a fruit press. It doesn't have a gauge for me to see exactly how many pounds I'm pressing. So I just kind of have to feel it. If you hear squishy, that's not 10 pounds. But anyway, it's again, it was kind of a learning curve for me, but I really truly love this press. So it's been 15 minutes. To pull it out, and at this point we hope that it is sticking together and netting, because if not, then we did something wrong. But let's see. Ooh, it's delicate. See, it's starting to net. Okay. We are going to flip it. Very carefully. Okay, let me just check the... Alright. So now we're going to do, if you guys have the weights, 30 minutes at 20 pounds. Listening for sound of squishiness as well as pressure. When it gets real tight when I spin it. So it's starting to get tight. I want 20 pounds, so I want it to be tighter than it was before. Feels about good. 20 minutes, we'll be back. So it's been 30 minutes at 20 pounds. 20 pounds. Again, I don't have the gauge. So I'm going to flip it for the last time. And now we are looking, ooh, looking good. It's netting together nicely. So now we're going to pull this out, flip it again, and we're looking for overnight at 50 pounds. Look at that. Beautiful. That's what you want to see. Still very delicate, but it is doing its thing. So now when I press it overnight, in theory, you won't see any of those curds. It'll completely be a solid. What we're hoping for. But if it doesn't happen, we just press it longer. So now I'm looking for a hard press. That was a really firm turn. All right. See you guys in the morning. Good morning, guys. I am about to check the cheese to see. We're crossing fingers. This is always the point where I get nervous. Make sure, hopefully it turned out really well. But before that, there's another step we take. We actually soak it in a brine. We're going to soak the cheese in a brine for 8 hours. So I'm going to get the brine together. It's just a real simple brine. You're going to need a gallon of water. You just put, actually I'll do this first, a tablespoon of calcium chloride, a teaspoon of white vinegar, and 2.5 cups of salt. And you just stir that up until all of the salt is dissolved. Okay, so the brine is good and ready to go. Now is for the moment of truth for this cheese. Oh man. So far so good. Cheesecloth likes to stick to this cheese. All right. So very, very, very carefully peel off the cheesecloth. It netted beautifully, guys. Awesome. Careful, careful. That is what you want to see. That turned out beautiful. And you guys can see this would be white if we didn't use the coloring. Now we're going to dip it in the brine. This is going to go in the brine for 8 hours. So my husband happens to be home today. He's going to flip it for me after 4 hours and then sprinkle a half teaspoon of salt right on top of the cheese. Okay, so doesn't matter which side you put down first, and for some reason I'm debating it. I guess I'm going to put pretty side down first. You guys see, if you have enough salt, it should be floating. So it is just going to float there. We'll flip it in 4 hours. Meantime, I'm just gonna throw this over it, still a little bit. Got some cheese chunks on it, but at least nothing's gonna be falling into the pan. There we go. All right guys, made it back from work, and this Colby has been floating in its brine for about 8.5 hours now. So, but that's okay if it goes a little bit longer. So we're gonna take it out. Actually, I'm gonna get a plate to put under here because it's gonna drip. So I just have a metal rack, and this is just a little plastic mat that you could put the cheese on. Helps for air circulation, and as well, you never want to put your cheese on a metal rack because it will discolor it and leave the lines. So let's get this bad boy. Still looking good. I'm going to make sure it's not touching any of the metal, which it's not. And then I just have a small cheesecloth that I'm going to cover it. And then what I'm going to do is just flip it before I go to bed. I'm going to flip it every couple of hours this evening, and then tomorrow, starting tomorrow, for about a week or until completely dry, no more moisture is coming out of it. I'm going to flip it twice a day, and then until it's ready to be waxed. So that is it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hope this helps you realize how easy it is to make a Colby. Not very hard. So now all I'm going to do is go put this in my cave and wax the cheddar I got behind me. So again, thank you guys for watching. Everything will be in the description below, Amazon links, if you need any of the supplies to make these hard cheeses. Have a great day, guys.